What is reality? Is it shared perception, physical experience, measurable, repeatable activity? Well, whatever it is, it's not these movies. This month, I took on a pack of movies that don't understand computers and pretend that the virtual part of virtual reality is just semantic. Welcome to the Oktoberfest podcast. I am Jeff, your host and digester of digital disaster, and this is RealityFest. I struggled a lot with the naming of this one. I chose these movies on Vibe, as I often do, and ended up with a slate of early to mid 90s sci fi madness that mostly fit the theme of virtual reality. But a couple of outliers stretched that too far for this to be VR Fest. Instead, we have a good mix VR, AR, LSDR. Whatever they are, this group is consistently wrong about how nearly everything works: computers, physics, human behavior, a couple of cases, camera focus, almost always CG effects. This was a gauntlet of inaccuracy. So let's get right into it. First up, 1992's The Lawnmower Man. Let's be real specific here. Not Stephen King's The Lawnmower Man. It was originally released by that name, but King sued successfully because the movie that New Line produced here had nothing to do with the magical satyr that runs a lawn care business, which is what the original short story was about. The cyberpunk VR madness here bears no resemblance. Written and directed by Brett Leonard and his wife Gimel Everett, remember these names, Lawnmower Man exposes the dangers of the now unavoidable killer tech that is VR, and predicts accurately how it would be used to turn a mentally disabled man into a telekinetic genius with the ability to turn people into CGI marbles. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's run this one down because it's bananas. Pre-Bond Pierce Brosnan is Dr. Angelo. He works for a shady tech company with military ties, working on a project that uses VR and nootropic drugs to increase intelligence and aggression in chimps, with the goal of making cyborg monkey soldiers, who would probably be both less effective and more expensive than traditional soldiers and drones. Shockingly, his test monkey gets aggressive, but chimps are usually so docile. Remember Nope? It kills a guard and escapes into a nearby town. The poor critter encounters Jeff Fahey as Job, a dim-witted lawn care worker, seemingly the inspiration for Ben Stiller's Simple Jack, who is under the care of the priest who runs the church he lives behind. Job befriends the injured animal, thinking he's the comic book character Cybo Man, which goes well until the church gets involved. Evil company is called, monkey is shot, Job is traumatized, and then beaten by the priest for taking in a monkey, I guess. Remington Steele is reprimanded because his project was too effective, and his work is put on hold, which he finds unacceptable, being an arrogant prick who thinks he's onto something that will save humanity. We get about 40 minutes of scenes telling us that Job is dumb, Angelo's wife hates him, and the world is terrible. Every time a TV is turned on, there's a clip about war. Angelo's neighbor is beating his wife and kid constantly. The whole town seems to revel in mocking the slow fellow who does all their odd jobs, except for the one lady who problematically wants to bone him. Eventually, Mamma Mia has the bright idea that he should use his totally safe and not psychosis-inducing process on the gardener. 7 hours of movie later, Frank Lapidus is wicked smart, having learned all of the world's knowledge Matrix style, VR injecting the data into his head. Somehow this also gives him the ability to move things with his mind and makes him sexy. He starts hooking up with the local harlot until he scrambles her brain during a bizarre VR sex session. Angelo and Job have been working with the big evil company, showing that they have a solid foundation for a working product that would sell for billions in 90s money. So, of course, evil business director decides he wants to fuck it all up by re-implementing the old formula that caused RoboChimp to go all Harambe. Fun side note, the director is Dean Norris, probably best known as Hank from Breaking Bad, or Tony from Total Recall, the guy with all the weird shit growing on his face. Of course, adding super aggro back into the mix when you've already made an unstable genius out of a man who's been abused by pretty much everyone since birth is a brilliant idea and won't end with a priest being burned to death with digital flames. So, of course, Job loses his shit when Goldeneye is away at evil Corporal headquarters, trying to avoid being kidnapped because that's how companies do business. Tonight, the Lawnmower Man settles all debts. He starts by turning his abusive caretaker into an early Adobe After Effects demo of a man on fire, while making profound-sounding declarations and spouting likely inaccurate Bible verse. Then he finds the bully who runs the gas station and uses his newfound powers to make gas hoses much longer than they used to be, all to tie the man up before mulching his brain with a VR lawnmower. Finally, he takes his prized lawn care tool to his pal Danny's house, the kid who's constantly being assaulted by his drunken old man, and uses remote control and the big red yard cutter to trash the guy's house before launching it through the air and turning him into kibble. He also lobotomizes Robinson Crusoe's wife and turns a couple of agents of evil business into digital marbles before exploding them. We've now established that VR suit plus drugs grants the following abilities: telekinesis, pixel based pyrokinesis, digital telepathy, and basically turning reality into whatever you want. This seems like a good get for a super genius, but Easy Rider 2 decides he'd rather have the mainframe and evil business ingest him so that he can live on in the 90s internet. Why be a god in the real when you can travel over 14 4 kbps modem to at least 3 dozen companies worldwide? While Dutch the Clutch, watch Psych, totally worth it, gets set up to vacate his meat suit, Thomas Crown grabs a bunch of C4 off the now dead Marble Men and demands a ride from the traumatized widow of his freshly mulched neighbor and her kid, dragging two innocents into his final confrontation with the monster he's unleashed. He also takes the time to hack the system and lock out the internet connections remotely, meaning he dialed in to turn off the ability to dial in. Look, I know the internet wasn't well known back in 94. This is a poor plan. You're better off finding the junction box on site and hitting it with an axe or literally anything else. We get some more impossible tech interaction from the now PC bound Job and a whole monologue about nonsense. He declares his birth cry will be every phone on the planet ringing at once. So his goal is to become an annoying telemarketer. There are easier ways than having your body juiced into an empty sack in a VR suit somehow and shoving your brain into an Amiga. Anyhow, Dante's Peak and the kid escape the building just as it explodes, and we're left wondering for about 3 seconds if Digital Job managed to find a connection out in time. The explosion proves they had access to actual fire, which makes the pixelated pyrotechnic priest even more pathetic. We get a happy ending where Bond, the new widow, and the kid from Last Action Hero are leaving town and getting away from computers, because apparently they're real close now. And finally, we see a montage of buildings all over the world with phone ringing audio. This shot would be less impactful these days. We'd be treated to like 4 houses in a neighborhood with ringing and a lot of cell phones lighting up with potential spam. Lawnmower Man was made for $10 million and brought in about $150 million worldwide. It was the largest indie flick of '92, despite being absolutely insane. The VR hype was big, Stephen King was big, and the internet wasn't far enough along for people to learn what madness was in store before going to theaters, I guess. The early 90s had a hard-on for VR like the 2020s had for NFTs, both ultimately worthless. This movie opens with a text blurb talking about how, at the turn of the millennium, VR will be in widespread use, allowing us to enter artificial worlds. Its creators foresee millions of positive uses, while others fear it's a new form of mind control. This, of course, is hysterically inaccurate in hindsight, unless you replace the word VR with social media. Leonard and Everett used Stephen King's name to very effectively sell an ineffective movie about computers turning a normal guy into a VR killer. A few years later, the same duo made a movie about a VR killer being turned into a real guy. This one's a lot better. Virtuosity came to theaters in 1995. 3 years brought better, but still bad, CG effects, and a hot new bit of technobabble. Nanomachines. Denzel Washington stars as Parker Barnes, an ex-cop imprisoned after a bust gone bad. He's part of a beta test for a new law enforcement training sim using VR and AI. Russell Crowe is Sid 6.7, the scenery-chewing psycho AI used in the simulator. In a bit of Matrix-adjacent action, we open with 2 cops pursuing an unsub through a world that feels a little bit off. Things go wrong during an encounter with the bad guy in a sushi restaurant that leads to one cop dead and the other being choked out by our villain. The sim ends, and we discover that Sid managed to kill the guy playing as cop number 2 for real. The DA lady is very mad this technology doesn't work right. But how is it ever supposed to in the first place? This training is basically a video game where 2 humans are pitted against a program that can teleport, generate weapons, and kill with impunity. They're instructed to act like every one of the non-reactive NPCs is a real person. This will train them to be better at exactly no part of this job. Also, if this is basically a glorified first-person shooter, why bother making a super intelligent AI bad guy? Well, because movie has to happen. The death of inmate Redshirt has put the program in jeopardy, though, and the powers that fund are thinking about pulling the plug. For some reason, this makes the lead dev want to bring the lunatic murderer he wrote into the real world, and conveniently, the lab he's working in also has a project using nanobots to make self-healing, glass-eating robots from their weird, chunky AI program cores. A bit of bait and switch and a lot of no one ask about my motives later, Maximus is out in the real world in a brand new, nearly indestructible body with a whole lot of killing in mind, and Training Day is pulled out of prison to catch him. Basically, it's Demolition Man. all the way to there is no way this guy is in jail. Sly is imprisoned in Demolition Man because Wesley Snipes made it look like some hostages died during a bust. Greasy Bear is locked up because after his wife and kid are taken hostage by a terrorist and blown up in an attack that cleanly removes his arm, he kills the terrorist and a couple of reporters who should really know better than to pop out at a burned, bleeding, one-armed man rampaging through a terrorist hideout. No law enforcement agency is going to let him take a rap for this, and only the lawyer from Con Air would be unable to get him off a charge given the state of things, let alone leave him stuck with a 20-year sentence for doing his fucking job. So yeah, Demolition Man 2, but instead of defrosted blade, we get nanorobot Javert. Beautiful Mind goes on an increasingly public rampage, raiding a cyberpunk nightclub where Tracy Lords is singing a Paul Oakenfold song about Kurt Cobain's suicide in peak mid-90s fashion. Crimson Tide is the only one who can stop him for reasons. Turns out, Sid's brain was made by feeding the minds of hundreds of serial killers into a program. How did they get these minds? How are they added to the program? What does this sentence even mean? Doesn't matter, shut up. The killer in control is, of course, the same guy that blew up He Got Game. Eventually, we get a showdown between the Pope's Exorcist and Malcolm X in a high-rise, and Sid gets splattered all over some really convenient glass sheets. Barnes gets his core, the developer is picked up by the cops, and we're all done here, right? No, we're not. That would be too clean a movie. Instead, we need to talk about Kelly Lynch and Kaylee Cuoco. Yeah, the love interest from Roadhouse and the girl who would grow up to be the hot chick in that insulting show about geeks that I refuse to watch are in this. Lynch is a clinical psychologist who tags along with Denzel for the whole movie because he needs someone to explain the plot to. She does very little. At one point, they go to her home and he meets her 9-year-old daughter to set up some stakes for later that they seem to forget about until the movie should already be over. Of course, the kid gets kidnapped, so of course they have to save her, which of course means putting Sid back into the computer to find out where she is. And of course, letting the asshole who set him loose in the first place to kill a bunch of people run things again. Which gets another cop killed because no one other than Denzel gets to be effective in this film. Somehow, using the magic of fiber optics and robot arms, he saves the day in the nick of time, and we finally get our happy ending about 20 minutes after the credits should have rolled. Virtuosity is pretty dumb, and has a really dumb name, but it is fun. Crow's having a blast in this, and Denzel is being, well, Denzel. You got a wacky villain and a serious protag, and they work, despite all the side stuff being limp. It's bright, and while the effects work looks dated, it looks alright. The same cannot be said for the last flick. I would rather use melon ballers to remove my eyes than return to the low poly VR of Lawnmower Man. Unfortunately, it only made $37 million on a $30 million budget, and Brett Leonard would mostly direct music videos for the rest of his career. The tech here is nonsense again, though. Nanomachines was as magic a phrase as VR in 95, but claiming that they can just absorb glass to repair an android body doesn't hold up to any level of thinking. If it is just glass, Sid would have been as fragile as a Chihuly exhibit. Instead, he's super strong and bullet resistant. Also, it doesn't matter how extreme the visual images are in your VR headset, it isn't going to give you an aneurysm unless you have pre-existing epilepsy. But hey, computers and technology are magic, right? You can do anything if no one understands how it works. That must have been the whole pitch for Ghost in the Machine, the 1993 electronic poltergeist shit show directed by Rachel Talalay. Not one part of this plot makes sense, and they try to hide the lack of logic by using computers as a buffer. This aggression will not stand. Having access to a modem does not allow you to turn on a light switch, let alone set a dishwasher to explode. The movie opens with an exterior of a typical suburban family home. The family inside is yelling about closing windows before sitting down for dinner, which is a totally normal conversation that real people have, and not a setup for how a killer might get into their house. It's totally unnecessary because doors stay unlocked all the time. A car pulls up in front of their home and a hand consults an address book. A physical address book? What the hell is that about? The camera moves through the house. We see a fresh apple pie and a baseball mitt on the counter. Tables covered in plates of half-finished dinner. Families gathered in front of their TV on the sofa. And just when I'm about to lecture them for not cleaning up after their meal, we discover they've all been murdered. The news calls him the address book killer. Apparently, this guy finds people's Rolodexes and kills everyone listed in order. That has to be hell on his gas budget. What if entry number 1's in Sheboygan and entry 2's in Miami? Luckily for him, everyone in this movie lives in the same area of suburban Ohio. We see his bloody hands putting some trophy photo albums in his trunk, and having recently watched a season of Criminal Minds, I can tell you that this unsub would have been caught before getting to victim number 2. Karen Allen shows up with a bad red dye job and a TWA uniform. She is a single mom to 90s kid, a collection of the most obnoxious possible cliches misunderstood by adults about kids of the era. He's got baggy jeans. He's got boxers pulled up out of him. He's got oversized, colorful t-shirts. He's a white kid in Ohio who's trying to talk like a member of NWA. I instantly hated everything about this kid, even before he started dropping cringe pickup lines on the girl collecting recycling and shaming his mother's wardrobe for coming from catalogs. Also, the actor sucks. We meet the kid as he tries to run a lotto scam on some random dude, claiming he has the winning ticket but can't cash it because he's a minor. This seems to establish that A, the kid's a piece of shit, and B, his friend can work a voice modulator and a telephone. They play it as though these kids are computer whizzes because all geeks in the 90s wore backwards hats and ran poorly thought out cons for $50 before being caught by their parents. Anyhow, Marion Ravenwood drags her kid to knock off Babbage's to buy her boss some desktop software as a gift. Look, I know we're not computer literate here, but buying data organization software is never a nice present. Just give the guy a gift card or promise he'll never have to deal with your kid, who sucks. She gets a demo of the software, which includes a feature that uses a hand scanner to read in pages of your address book, and then OCR translates it into usable text in the computer. This kind of shit barely works now, let alone on a giant beige hunk of crap from the 90s. She happily hands over her overflowing book and lets the salesman scan a page in. Listener, take note. Never fucking do this. Do not give your personal information to a sales drone to input into a public demo computer. This is very dumb. Even dumber, directly after talking about how she lives out of this book, she leaves the overstuffed wallet of papers at the store. Ugh. While Claire is setting herself up to be scammed by any future customers who use that demo box, her contemptible offspring was gawking at the PC tech working behind the counter on some hardware. The guy's a little creepy and doesn't like being bothered by some brat who thinks he knows about computers, and that's all the setup we need to know that he's the killer. He gets his hands on the forgotten book of addresses and is presumably on his way to start slaughtering when his car flies off the road and he laughs while skidding upside down through a graveyard. What? Don't worry about it. We're on to the next scene. The cops and medics don't seem to notice the car's trunk is full of bloody photographs and instruments of death, and he ends up getting the best possible medical treatment until lightning strikes the MRI machine he's in and somehow uploads his consciousness into the Matrix. Magnets. How do they work? Well, not like that. And that's our setup. Crazy guy who works on computers gets zapped into the electrical grid because he was getting a brain scan during a thunderstorm. There should be hundreds of these ghosts at this point. You might notice that I haven't mentioned the killer by name or actor yet. Well, I had to look his name up after the movie because I didn't remember hearing it. And this garbage 90s forgotten shitfest was probably his biggest role. The actor is Ted Marco, whose only project this decade was voice work on a podcast series you've never heard of. The character's name is Carl. It doesn't matter. We meet Bram, an adult zero cool whose career was trashed by an ill-advised hack on the IRS just a few years too early to end up working for a cybersecurity firm. Played by ubiquitous character actor Chris Mulkey. He's got almost 300 credits. You would recognize him, but might not be able to place him. Pure that guy. He's just gotten a job at a computer company that specializes in selling user data in 1993. His boss is another great that guy, Rick DeCommon, who I recognize as Anna Faris's father in the original Scary Movie. I think he's the best part of this one, and he's only here for 3 minutes to drop a Chekhov's gun. Bram notices strange activity on the network because Carl's ghost has started stalking Karen Allen over the internet. It should be noted, this was a lot harder before social media, but CyberGhost is able to do it in a flash. He starts offing people in her address book using Final Destination style setups, tangentially related to electricity, but not at all connected to the internet. He kills her boss by setting his microwave on overdrive with the door open, which, as you know, turns the entire room into a microwave, and microwaves can be controlled via power outlet. He kills the guy she's dating that she doesn't like. He runs a vehicle crash test lab and is a dick. There's a 20-minute sequence in which the ghost tries and fails to kill him with a test car before he gives up and somehow ignites the man with an automatic hand dryer. He tries to kill Jessica Walter, who shows up playing her usual role, but Lucille Bluth is too good for this movie. By the time he gets to her, the family is onto his shenanigans and they've removed all the electronics from the house. What's a homicidal specter trapped in the wires to do? Well, he invents swatting, of course. He generates a bunch of fake police reports to her house, and of course, where there are a lot of cops, someone is sure to get killed. But this is a well-to-do white lady in Ohio, so after law enforcement turns her house into Swiss cheese and sends her into a coma via shock, off camera, they couldn't afford to pay her for 2 days of filming. She has an airtight lawsuit against the city when this is all over. Considering the powers at his disposal, Carl is dog shit at killing people. He has trouble tracking down the obnoxious kid because he's staying with his best friend, and once he does find the target, he kills a babysitter in a sequence that probably led to a lot of dirty socks in Quentin Tarantino's house. The girl's barefoot in the kitchen, not just because of misogyny, and we get setups for death by iron and knife and oven, but in the end, it's a leaking dishwasher and an electrical short that fries her when she puts her bare feet on the ground. Or it was supposed to be, but she wouldn't put her feet down. So instead, he sets the dishwasher to the common explode setting. It actually reads this on the display before it bursts. Like I said, this guy sucks at killing. Finally, our protagonists decide to fight back. They figure out the signal is coming from Bram's office network. It's suggested they just delete him, but the kid explains that nothing on a computer is ever really deleted, you just can't find it anymore. This is about on par for an idiot kid who only thinks he knows PCs. The adult hacker should know that a zero fill would get the job done. But better yet, you can pull the drive, or the array, and the dude is fucked. Instead, they go for the next rational answer: use a particle accelerator. For fuck's sake. If I wanted to chronicle all the things this movie gets wrong about how shit works, I would be here until the heat death of the universe. Suffice it to say that turning on a particle accelerator will not turn the disembodied spirit encoded into the electrical grid by an MRI machine due to an electrical overload into a VR monster that can project itself onto physical reality. Yes, that is a sentence I never thought I would need to say. I fucking hate this movie. They kill the bad guy by making Hans Gruber proud and shooting the glass, which somehow leads to him being sucked into the accelerator and turning into an Apple LC2 screensaver. Tetsuo, he is not. Also worth noting, the effect used to bring him into the world as Virtual Guy is the same one used to kill evil business grunts by Marvelization in Lawnmower Man. The Good Place did it better. I don't expect anyone to know this movie. It cost $12 million to make and brought in just over $5 million domestic. I hate that it changed my ranking of worst child reared by Karen Allen on film, lifting Shia LaBeouf's Crystal Skull asshole out of the basement and firmly placing Will Horniff's Josh Monroe in the spot. Horniff and his pal were both in The Sandlot the year before this. Will was one of the bully kids. Brendan Quinton Adams was Kenny, one of the gang. He's the better actor of the two, and he's actually had a career in the 90s, showing up in The Mighty Ducks, The People Under the Stairs, and oh, poor kid. Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. Ugh. I was recently asked why I don't give ratings for the movies in these episodes, so I thought I'd take a moment to address that. During the Oktoberfest, I do give entirely subjective ratings, because I'm working with one genre and I can sort of compare the movies to the others on similar ground. But even then, the rating system sucks. A movie rated 1 or 2 could be more fun to watch than a 5 or 6, because mediocre movies are boring, and bad movies can be interestingly bad. So what do I rate on? How well the movie was made, how good the visuals are, the acting, the script, does it succeed within its genre? There are too many variables, and with these themed movie fests, the movies can be from wholly different schools of film. There's just no viable way to boil a review down to a single number, and no one wants to hear a breakdown of 8 categories of scoring for each movie. Now, the listener who asked did have a clever idea, using a different rating metric for each theme. For instance, Lawnmower Man would get 2 VR headsets. Virtuosity would get 3 VR headsets. Ghost in the Machine would get a pile of human feces packed into a sleep mask and labeled Oculus Rift. We're not going to do this. The next pick on this list is another niche picture I remember renting from Blockbuster as a youth. Brainscan from 1994, starring Edward Furlong, Frank Langella, and no one else I recognize. The movie opens with the first credit scene of the binge that isn't just names over weird CG. The credits roll over scenes of Furlong having a nightmare and flashbacks, presumably of the dream he's having, showing the aftermath of the car wreck that killed his mother. This sets up some backstory in the opening minutes and gives us some character building that goes absolutely nowhere. The car accident, the scar on his knee, the dead mother, none of them play into the story in a meaningful way. But hey, character development. We're not going to like this kid based on John Connor's performance, because it turns out he's a dog shit actor. We were all fooled because he was propped up by talent, T2. Yeah, when Arnold Schwarzenegger's delivery is bolstering your performance, you probably suck at this. Furlong is Michael, a teenage outcast who loves horror content and seems to live alone as his father is traveling for work during the entire run of the film. He uses this freedom to be a creep and take video of the girl who lives next door undressing, which is a good way to establish an unlikable protagonist. Michael apparently takes all of his calls through his computer, which is operated by a voice-controlled assistant modeled after Igor that works better than modern-day Siri. His best bud Kyle calls him up and tells him about this crazy new game advertised in Fangoria that creates a custom experience curated for the player. American History X calls the software company and has a strange conversation that leads to him being assigned Death by Design, a terror experience across 4 interactive CD-ROMs. He pays nothing because the monetization model here was lifted from the Underpants gnomes. The next day, he receives his first disc. Remember getting CDs in the mail? No? Because that almost never happened unless it was an AOL free trial. Yeah, that sounds right. Hawk runs the program and sits in front of his TV. He's told he has a time limit to complete a task. He is to murder some guy. There's some blackness, and then he's stalking through a house while a creepy voice tells him what to do, because all the best games have non-stop guidance snags and operate completely on rails. If this were a game, it would suck. Sure, the graphics are incredible. It's like it's real. But you have a tight timeline, a simple objective, an incessant voice directing you, and no opportunity to explore options. So, spoilers for a 32-year-old movie that no one cares about, it's not a game. The software hacks his brain, and he actually goes off and kills a guy and cuts his foot off and then sticks it in his freezer. He freaks out, because of course he does, and decides not to play anymore while dodging Langella, a cop who's looking into the murder. So Jimmy Cuervo tries ducking the game and his pal and the girl next door while trying to figure out what to do about the dead guy's foot, and gets a visit from the thing that saves this movie from being a complete waste of time. The voice on the phone and in the game that has been guiding him through his homicidal experience emerges from his TV set and introduces himself as the Trickster. T. Ryder Smith, a stage actor with only a few screen credits, absolutely nails this role. Trickster is a weird-looking demon of some sort who jumps around and is generally fully committed and entirely unhinged, and by far the most interesting part of this slow-moving snooze fest. Trickster explains that our hero left a witness to his crime and needs to play the next disc to resolve the loose end. He eventually relents and starts the game, this time awakening with no memory of what he did to discover that he's killed his best friend. This really is a shit game. This time he didn't even get the FPS murder experience. What the hell's the point? Well, now he's really never going to play again. Until his demon pal shows up and tells him he left evidence. So for the 3rd time, he undergoes the game's hypnosis. Or doesn't, because this time he seems to be in complete control, and we see the whole fiasco as he tries to find a footprint left behind during a community manhunt to catch the unknown multiple murderer in this small Jersey burb. Somehow this ends with the principal of his school being crushed by scaffolding and a cop being shotgunned in the gut by an overzealous citizen vigilante. No one notices Eddie F., who fails to remove the evidence, but that doesn't matter because he's responsible for more people dying, so Trickster's happy. Now there's just one thing left to do. He's got to kill the girl next door that he's obsessed with. He sneaks into her house, argues with Trickster about how he doesn't want to kill her, gets possessed, and then gets shot by Skeletor, only to wake up in his gaming chair on the night it all started. Turns out, in a very Michael Douglas twist, the whole thing was the game. His week-long ordeal of guilt and paranoia and having to murder his best friend and stalking Target was just a hallucination implanted by his TV, because that's how games work. Interestingly, this movie was written by Andrew Kevin Walker. While the name may not be familiar, his other work probably is. Walker wrote Brainscan while another script he'd sold was in a 3-year development hell. A little movie about a serial killer on a mission pursued by Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. Yeah, this guy wrote 7. Also, Burton's Sleepy Hollow, and he did some script doctoring on Event Horizon. That's some serious writing chops. I'm inclined to chalk this movie's mediocrity up to the director, and Edward Furlong. There was some real potential here. There's the start of some bogus video games corrupt kids' minds messaging. There's a lot of bad stereotyping about horror fans. They could have leaned into any of this, but they didn't. They should have leaned into Smith's Imp, because he was great. But instead, this is a charcoal briquette of a film. Entirely unused potential. But at least there was potential, and it was a complete film. It felt like a movie happened. None of these things can be said for the next thing I suffered through, Albert Pune's 1993 full moon release, Arcade. Well, one of them. Let's take a moment to talk about Albert Pune. From 1988 to 1999, he directed 26 movies, pretty much all low-budget sci-fi nonsense for Charles Band and Full Moon. This pace is impressive, but doesn't leave a whole lot of time for attention to details like effects, or acting quality, or plot. Arcade, which I could only find in 90s appropriate 480 pillar box format from a time before HD, looks like crap, which is fitting, because it is crap. After 3 minutes of names over terrible CG, we watch a teenage girl wake up, walk downstairs to the living room of her home, and discover her mother has shot herself in the head. Welcome to this sci-fi movie about an evil VR game that eats kids. Here's some maternal suicide trauma as an amuse-bouche. The girl is our lead, Alex, played by Megan Ward, who was in Encino Man and Joe's Apartment and more than 350 episodes of General Hospital. Top-notch performer. She hangs out with a diverse group of high school tropes that are all not quite right. But the only two worth noting are Peter Billingsley as the cool video game master, which was not a thing in the 90s, and baby Seth Green as Stilts, who is basically just Seth Green. The crew decides to head over to an arcade called Dante's Inferno to check out the new game confusingly called Arcade, a VR experience that is being previewed at this tiny underground game spot. John Delancey, Q from Star Trek, pops in for a cameo as the slightly sleazy Barker for the new game. He gets Alex's boyfriend Greg started in the big cabinet and hands out home versions to the gathered crowd of teens. Okay, we're pausing the recap for a minute. We need to discuss this game, games marketing, and how consoles work. First, the game. Arcade is a weird polygon face that mocks the player and tells them to kiss reality goodbye, but the program itself consists of 7 levels that have short timers for completion. The one we see most has the player skateboarding through an ugly tunnel with flat, spinning spikes that don't seem to interact with the player at all, while they move at slow speeds to try to find the exit. There's a 1-minute time limit after which a ball of light with an ugly CG skull in it kills you and the game is over. This would not drive kids wild. This would not get played at all. This is an arcade cabinet that ends up in an empty corner of Fiddlesticks because it costs $5 per play and is about as fun as waiting around in a dentist's office. Next gripe, the marketing. Alright, some street team marketing for this to build up hype might work, but handing out free VR game setups in the 90s would bankrupt a company. This shit's expensive now. It was prohibitive in the 90s. Only a couple of companies even tried to sell this gear back in the day, and it ran about $1,000. Q is out here giving away $30,000 for the home gaming equipment that's just going to devour his arcade revenue stream, with only one garbage launch title, and the thing isn't going to score high in reviews. Especially when it starts eating its customer base, but we're not there yet. Final note for now. The makers of this movie did not understand how consoles work. We see kids take this portable VR setup home and plug it into their TV, then strap goggles onto their head. For a gaming system to work, you need something that's running the goddamn game. If the headset's doing it, you don't need the TV. The TV can't do it, it's just a display. You need some type of computer system to run your computer programs, and that should have been evident even in 1992. So back to the action. Greg, the beta testing boyfriend, never comes out of the VR cave where he was demoing the game. None of his friends seem to think this is a big deal, figuring he just left without his car keys, or his car, because apparently Greg's an idiot. They all head home to try out their new arcade consoles, which act a bit squirrely. Ralphie, the game pro, is fascinated by some poorly rendered polygons and is still stuck on the skateboarding level when Alex shows up at his place in a panic because her dude never came home. She's convinced, correctly as it happens, that he's been sucked into the game. Long, stupid story short, the AI in the game was created using brain cells from a dead kid who now needs to eat the souls of gamers to survive. Which is going to be hard because a product that eats its testers is not going to make it to market. The only way to save their friends is for Alex and the dirt bike kid to beat the game. Unfortunately, Disney sued the pants off Full Moon because their effects look too much like Tron, so we don't get to see this. Instead, we get a series of shots of an increasingly bloody Alex doing banal puzzle tasks while a terribly rendered flying something swoops around. She meets another player who's totally not the kid the AI was born from, and together they progress to the final level in about 3 minutes of runtime, which probably couldn't have been more than 5 minutes of playtime given the 1-minute level timers. And the kid reveals that he's the AI. Alex somehow succeeds, and all the trapped kids are released, and the demon AI is defeated, but someone thought this was a clever enough movie to warrant a sequel-bait shot of an evil kid on a sidewalk in front of her house for some reason. This flick's an absolute mess. It was written by David S. Goyer, who would go on to write the Nolan Batman movies and Dark City and some other genuinely good stuff. But also Batman v Superman, so I guess he also kind of sucks. After filming, it ended up in post-production hell. The visual effects scenes were scrapped after the Disney lawsuit, and they quickly hit the cap of their $750,000 budget. And the ambition of a movie about an evil VR game that costs less to produce than a commercial VR rig just outstripped the ability of the team creating it. Puna abandoned the project during post to make Nemesis, which went on to get 3 direct-to-video sequels. I didn't enjoy Arcade, but I pity it. This was a flick done dirty by the process of making movies. It still doesn't understand the first thing about the chosen subject, though. And that's a common thread through all these selections. Movies that have chosen to center around a specific thing that does exist, but don't bother to learn about that thing at all. VR and nootropic drugs are both real things. Someone involved in Lawnmower Man heard these terms somewhere. But what they do with the concepts is inaccurate. Virtuosity uses similar misconceptions about VR and leans into nanobots as techno-Bible hand-wavery, but is a better movie because even without those elements, Washington vs. Crow is a compelling flick. You can take all the sci-fi bullshit out and make this a movie with Denzel as a regular cop and Russell as a regular psycho criminal, and it'd be a fun time. Ghost in the Machine? No, I'm not getting into it again. This film and all evidence of its existence should be buried under all the discarded copies of the E.T. Atari game. Brainscan seems to believe that a phone signal can read your mind, and a video output can so thoroughly hypnotize you that you experience a full week in the span of 2 hours. And that gamers would enjoy this. Arcade, well, I just explained arcade. This isn't hard. You don't need a CS degree to get the essentials right. Can computers do math? Yes. Can they do magic? No. That's all I demand Hollywood understand. My demands will not be met. Good news is, my next 2 movies take me into the distant futures of 2033 and, 2021. It's fine. I'm sure they got everything right in Johnny Mnemonic. Okay, so they're half right. The movie opens with a text crawl talking about the new plague emerging in the second decade of the 21st century, corporations ruling society, and people blaming the new plague on technology. So, COVID, Silicon Valley, and those morons who set fire to 5G towers and then complained about how they were being silenced because they couldn't reach Twitter. Not a bad guess, but they whiffed on some other predictions. The only safe way to move data is via couriers with wetware implants, tech wired into their brains to securely store information. Our titular hero has the storage capacity of 80 whole gigabytes, 160 if he uses a doubler, which would fit on a $10 memory stick that you can hide literally anywhere. Also, by 2021, we're supposed to have cybernetics and VR internet, and Newark is a burned out shithole. Okay, 1 out of 3 ain't bad. So, Keanu is Johnny, a courier who is used to living the good life at the cost of his childhood memories. Yeah, he had to give up some brain space to fit that huge volume of storage your cell phone probably eclipses. Note, a quick bit of research has studies showing the capacity of the human brain is somewhere between 10 terabytes and 2.5 petabytes. Let's split the difference and say 900 terabytes. 80 gigabytes might be one childhood memory, but not your whole goddamn identity. Regardless, Neo wants his memories back and is angling to buy a full restore from the folks who wired him up in the first place. I have serious doubts to the plausibility of this. If he had a backup, he could just load that into his wetware. And there's no way the surgeons kept all the data they extract from people for decades. That shit is lost. Whatever. He calls his agent Ralphie, played by the prolific German character actor Udo Kier. Udo is great, and he's usually playing some twisted villain. He is not a Ralphie. Where's Peter Billingsley for this one? Dragonetti tells him he can get everything he wants if he just does this one last job. So Theodore Logan ignores the fact that the payload is 4 times his capacity, and that the clients are twitchy as hell, and that the password to get the junk out of his skull hasn't been pre-shared and is being faxed after the encrypt. He takes the job. But before the key is transmitted from Beijing to the buyers, the Yakuza attacks and kills his employers. Johnny Utah beats up some gangsters and escapes, making his way to Newark via scene transition, where he attempts to locate the unknown target for his death, which is already seeping into his cortex and threatening to melt his mind. He starts by tracking down Ralphie, still a dumb name, who set him up. The head Yakuza guy is waiting to take his head off using a laser whip attached to his thumb in one of the weirdest weapon choices possible. Luckily, Dizzy from Starship Troopers is nearby. She's a bodyguard with a bunch of implants and a bad case of NAS, which is basically tech-based Lou Gehrig's disease, who has a grudge against Udo. She intervenes on Johnny's behalf and agrees to protect him, and they make their escape by closing a rusty gate on the guy who has a goddamn laser whip in his hand. Turns out that while it can cut through humans like butter, it can't get through oxidized metal mesh. He could have just punched it. So Keanu and Jane book it and run into the low-techs, rebels who fight against the technology that has overrun society by using all the technology that overruns society. Alright, nearly everything in this movie is contradictory or hypocritical. Not sure if that's divide design or incompetence. Henry Rollins is here as a doctor who implants and services cybernetics and rails against people for being reliant on cybernetics. Ice-T runs the low-techs who hack into the broadcast systems and live in a shanty town on a ruined bridge made entirely out of technology bits. I guess When the world runs on brain implants and VR, desktop hackers are the Luddites. John Wick, who absolutely knows Kung Fu and hacks into the net using bits and pieces from a Radio Shack to make a VR interface so he can access a fax machine, contradictions again, absolutely doesn't need a bodyguard. But Dina Mayer wants her money, so she keeps protecting him. It turns out the shit in his head that's killing him is the cure for the pandemic. The company that developed it doesn't want it released because they earn more money selling treatment than cure. And the low-techs want it so they can broadcast it out to the world, because everyone is capable of synthesizing medical treatments from home in their filthy, bombed-out hovel. I guess. Desperate to get the info out of his head before it turns his brains into jelly, Speed visits the low-tech headquarters for help. Conveniently, Ice-T pointed out where his secret rebel headquarters were located to a stranger he just met in the street at the start of the movie, so it was easy to find. There, he meets with the real hero of the story, Jones, a cybernetic dolphin hacker. Jones is about to crack open the goods when the low-techs are attacked by the Yakuza and Dolph Lundgren, who's here as a mercenary called the Street Preacher. He's a crazy asshole. Rollins and Lundgren should have swapped roles here. Ivan Drago has a master's in chemical engineering, which is better credentials for being Dr. Spider than Rollins' aggressive intensity. Fun fact, Lundgren was on Fulbright track when he took a job bodyguarding Grace Jones, who brought him to New York and got him into acting. Not bad for a guy who could still absolutely kick your ass at 68 years old. The good guys win. The cure for gonorrhea persiflades is sent out to everyone's VCRs. Happily ever... Wait, what? ICE actually tells people to get your VCRs ready because we got what you need. How the hell is a society using VR internet, brain implant data couriers, and cybernetic implants using fucking VHS? This and the fax machine buffer earlier in the film are just baffling. Regardless, he doesn't give a whole lot of time between his announcement and the video stream, which just shows a lot of technical jargon and some videos of cell division. And somehow everyone in the world understands organic chemistry because even the assholes in the dive bar are glued to the TV watching a technical journal play out. If the whole population is this medically literate, you'd think that someone else would have found a cure by now. Moments after the broadcast, Big Pharma building's on fire because if there's one thing people love, it's infrastructure arson. Johnny Mnemonic flopped at the box office. Brought back less than $20 million on a $26 million budget. And despite all the stupid, it's a fun, weird flick. The tech's all over the place, the action's mediocre, but it's odd and entertaining, especially given where most of these actors ended up on their career trajectories. It's a dumb, strange, good time that totally bombed in theaters, which is also a perfect description of the last movie in this binge. There's no VR here. Shit, there's no R here, but it still seems to fit the vibe. But look, I don't pre-screen this stuff. I'm slapping together movies from bits I remember from decades-old TV showings and internet posts. Sometimes they don't all hit the brief. I'm fallible. Fuck off. Remember Rachel Talalay? She directed the pile of manure I talked about maybe 10 minutes ago. Well, she's back. I didn't do this on purpose. I didn't notice until the write-up here that I watched 7 movies from 5 directors. Just 2 years after inflicting the cringe of Ghost in the Machine on the world, she was back in the box office with Tank Girl, based on the comics of Alan Martin and Jamie Hewlett. You may know Hewlett's work from Gorillaz. That's his art too. Tank Girl is... See, the thing is... Tank Girl's about... Fuck, I have no idea what I just watched. It's a clusterfuck. It's colorful, it's loud, it's got maybe the most alt-90s soundtrack possible, curated by Courtney Love Cobain. It's got post-Point Break Lori Petty and pre-The Ring Naomi Watts. It's got Ice-T in a mutant kangaroo costume. It's got a headless Malcolm McDowell doing his best Dr. Claw impression for half the film. It has a goddamn Cole Porter musical number in the middle for no goddamn reason. I'm going to try to lay this out, but gods, there is no making sense of this. It's 2033. Asteroid impact has left the surface a desolate place devoid of water. An evil company known as Water and Power controls nearly all the resources through military power. Lori Petty is Rebecca/Tank Girl. She and her pals live in the middle of nowhere, off the grid, secretly siphoning water into their spastic hippie commune. They get raided by WP thugs, and Rebecca, who is clearly mentally unstable, is taken prisoner. Malcolm McDowell is Kesley, the head of the evil corp. He's a dick, and he enjoys stabbing people with deadly bottles that extract all the water from their victim in seconds. The Fremen would approve. He is, evidently, also mentally unstable. When Rebecca proves to be a real pain in the ass, he decides he wants to recruit her to work for him. When she says no, he decides torture is the best hiring tool available. Meanwhile, his second-in-command, Sergeant Small, Don Harvey, another That Guy actor, he was in Hudson Hawk, he's sexually harassing nerdy Naomi Watts, who plays an airplane technician who is conveniently named Jet. WP's HR department needs a serious audit. This is a hostile work environment that uses war crimes as a recruitment tool and prioritizes misogyny in their promotion structure. It's 2033. Did we learn nothing from the Me Too movement? Rebecca saves Jet from Sergeant Rapey Pants and tries to convince the mousy mechanic to come with her, but her attempt fails and she's punished by being dragged out to explore a cavern thought to be the source of the monstrous Rippers, a group of critters that have been thrashing Corpo property. The beasts attack before she can be shoved into the hole, though, and she manages to steal a tank while her new gal pal Jet hijacks a plane and the two skedaddle. During the attack, Kesley is mangled by the Rippers, losing an arm and needing some major facial surgery. They run into a little house on what probably used to be a prairie and encounter some bad sculpture done by a kid who used to live in the weird commune and interrogate the poor woman who lives in the house. She turns out to be John and Joan Cusack's older sister, Anne. She's credited as Subgirl either because she's into S&M or because they plan to have her drive an aquatic vehicle in a world with no water and cut it because that would be too crazy. Our heroes are told that the kid, Sam, was taken by Evil Corp and decide to set out to save her. But first they need to give their new war machines a makeover. We are treated to a slideshow of comic book art, which is a really cool way to montage, and then a Taken 3 level of smash cuts of tank makeover porn. Apparently, the tank and Jet are both now semi-sentient, capable of fully autonomous operation, and completely covered in trash. They finally hit the road to rescue the kid from slavery at a brothel / country club / orgy scene from Conan Painted Silver, just moments before she's molested by Iggy Pop. Though, before they get to that, Kit needs to have herself a dress-up scene in the stripper's locker room, which I think they kept on ice until they reused it in Tron Legacy. Rather than escape from the place after they find their target, they decide to force the woman who runs it to sing Let's Do It, which turns into a full-blown Broadway production and kills enough time for the bad guys to show up and re-kidnap Sam. Of course, now the ladies are going to get serious. They need to get the kid back from the evil bad guys, right? Or they could accidentally find the Rippers, earn their trust by running a side mission to hijack some guns by improving The Devil Wears Prada, learn their backstory about being reincarnated humans and one very good dog who were turned into super soldier kangaroos by an old government program, have a bizarre dance number, an interspecies romance, and then decide to save the girl. What the shit? Finally, after an hour of disorienting edits, maddening detours, and completely unhinged storytelling, we get to the big climactic battle, where Tank Girl fires beer cans out of a tank at the trapped villain, a holographic-headed Sam Loomis with a ninja food processor for a right arm. It doesn't matter how it ends. Nothing matters. Continuity, plot, logic, sanity, existence, the old gods, the deep, empty expanse of space leading to the core of the universe. Nothing. Oh yeah, Lori Petty's hairstyle changes in every goddamn scene. It gets shorter, it gets longer, it changes colors. It always looks like it was styled by a Cuisinart. Her wardrobe is scraps from the costume design floor of other movies on the lot, I assume. Everything is held together with safety pins. They had time for all of this, but not time to write a plot that makes any brand of sense. And you know what? Despite the terrible edits and the mind-blitzing choices and the general feeling that lots and lots of drugs were involved in every aspect of the film, it's still entertaining. It's not good. It's about as far from good as you can get without being Skinamarink. But it's fun, and that counts for something. It might have helped that the soundtrack reads like a set list from my preferred radio stations in the era. Bush, Bjork, Iggy Pop, Isaac Hayes, Portishead, Scott Weiland, Veruca Salt, and of course Hole. I could try to explain how the tech doesn't work here, but nothing works here. And as we've covered, nothing matters. Nothing may ever matter again. My mind is mulch. I've just ingested a mess of 90s techno slop and poured the remnants of my sanity into a microphone connected to the void. I need a drink. That's it for this month. As always, you can send your comments, complaints, suggestions, doctoral theses explaining how, actually, Tank Girl makes perfect sense to octoberfestcast@gmail.com or drop a comment on octoberfest.substack.com. Maybe subscribe while you're there to get notified when I put more of this stuff up. Or don't. You do you. And until next time, keep it real.